Before we get into today's episode, don't forget to sign up to the book and the VIP newsletter at thehighestandbestuse.com. For the book, you can get that at Amazon Chapters, Barnes & Noble, all of these places in paperback, ebook, hardcover, and of course now the Audible version as well. So grab the book, sign up to the VIP newsletter, thehighestandbestuse.com, and now to today's episode.
I'm Ali Nazarian, and the highest and best use for my business is to maximize the ROI for my investors while saving the planet.
Thanks for tuning into the Highest and Best Use Real Estate Podcast, where we talk techniques to optimize your land, structure, skill sets, and time, as well as the highest and best use principles to make your business more profitable, productive, and efficient. I'm your host, Ryan Carr, reminding you that good deals are found, great deals are created. I'm super excited for today. We have Ali Nazarian on the show. Ali is the founder of EcoLux Developments. He has a fantastic Facebook group called the Housing Builders and Developers of Canada. And he was also an engineer at Petronas, which is a major sponsor of the Mercedes Formula One team. So, my man.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. I'm actually surprised you know Petronas and Formula One.
See, I'm a different team.
You're
a different team, but
team.
I like the Petronas.
I can guess which team you're on.
I'm really excited.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm excited about the show today. This is going to be good.
Thank you. Me too. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, you and I basically met over Facebook, just through I think it was even your group.
Maybe, I guess we exchanged some. We have a lot of mutual friends. I think we were just exchanging, commenting probably on the same posts, or you comment on my post. Okay, I don't know. It's just social media. It's hard to remember how you met someone, but it's really good to see you in person. Yeah, for
sure. So I'm looking forward to today. We're going to talk about all of the active developments that you have on the go. I think there's a lot of people out there that talk the talk, but you're actually doing the do. Right. So today, that's what we're going to focus on, is everything that you're building and you're working on actively in the market. 3 projects that you and I talked about before the show. Why don't you kick those off and tell us a little bit about who you are and what those are like?
Thank you. Yeah. So I'll probably start with the background, how I got into this. I don't know if I'm jumping the questions here.
Yeah. Give us the version. Yeah.
So I'm an engineer by trade, a mechanical engineer. Used to work in oil and gas, which kind of people find it, ironic that I'm into sustainability and eco-friendly stuff, but I can do a whole show about how that came about.
Is that where EcoLux Developments merged? Or?
EcoLux, yeah. So I'll step back a little bit. So I've been an engineer. I always loved construction, new homes, just creating. That's why I wanted to be an engineer, because I wanted to create things, and new builds were always exciting for me. You see a piece of dirt and a bunch of material get dumped on the ground, and then people put it together and oh wow, it's a beautiful house. Right? Voila, what
so
do you
simple,
have here?
Right?
Yeah,
what could go wrong?
What could go wrong? Exactly. But it was the creative process was always fascinating for me. It's wow, you build a home and all these materials. I'm making it a little too philosophical, but it's piece of dirt, bunch of material, used to be a tree, now it's a ground, now it's somebody's home. Yeah. Right? So that transformation was always inspiring for me, and I always wanted to build homes. Never inspired about building a storage space, but not that it's a bad idea, but that's what was in my mind. So anyways, in 2014-15, I was living in Edmonton. City of Edmonton was putting out a lot of educational material. They were really promoting infill developments. They wanted to intensify the downtown core. I know Edmonton is big now, but it really started back then. Sure. And that's where I really got my first free education, was from City of Edmonton. Shout out to them for putting out educational material of what infill developments are and what you can do. And people would buy 50 by 100, 120 lots, and they would build semis. And then later on, they allowed basement suites. So now you can put 4. Apparently, right now you can do 8 on the same lot.
8?
Yeah.
8?
Yeah. You can
on
do
a 50
8
by 120?
On a 50 by 120 lot. You can do 8 units in Edmonton. Yeah. Wow. You can do front and back. Yeah. And then you split in the front and split front and back. So you have 4 units above and 4 units below.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
So, yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah. So, speaking of highest and best use of the land, that's why they don't have a housing crisis in Edmonton.
That's right, because they have density.
Because they can build. Yeah. Same thing in Ontario. Well, if you're lucky, you can build one. Yeah. But anyhow, so that's where I got my education. Tried to pull off a partnership with some friends and whatnot. Obviously, I didn't know anything back then. Sure. So, oil and gas went down, lost my job, and I was like, okay, I'm going to focus on learning something else on the side. And I tried to do this, and then end of 2015, I got a really nice job offer in a beautiful city called Lloydminster of 30,000 people in the middle of nowhere, border of Alberta and Saskatchewan. And you know how they say like the salary is the drug they give you to forget your dreams? Right. That was exactly what happened to me. It was like they put that in front of me.
Good. Like, what do we do?
Exactly. I'm like, okay, maybe I could make this work, but I'm not sure. But it's like, like the drug is there. I'm going to take it.
Was
like,
this Petronas?
No, Petronas was in Malaysia, actually. That's like, I lived in Malaysia for 10 years before coming to Canada. I was born in Iran, moved to Malaysia when I was 20, lived there for 10 years. Wow. I moved to Canada like about 11 years ago when I was,
you're well traveled.
30.
Holy.
Thank you. So anyways, I moved there, but I tried to keep that dream alive. So I started investing. 2016, I bought my first condo in Richmond Hill, where I live now, which turned out to be a great investment, although we don't recommend investing in condos. But if you can buy it with 5% down when it was cheap back then, it worked out. Yeah. 2017, eventually I pulled the trigger. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to buy a piece of land. There were a bunch of land there that, you know, because of the economy where people were not building, there were builders who bought it. So I'd be literally like, you know, driving for dollars or driving around. I called the signs on the lot. Yeah. And I was like, hey, would you sell it to me? So the guy ended up selling it to me like almost 10%, 7% below what he had bought it. But he was sitting on it for 2 years. So he was happy to like, you know, offload it. Sure. So I bought it and it became my own GC, started building it. And I'm like, wow, you know, just going to jump off the plane and build a parachute on the way down. But that's awesome. I did project management in my day job. So it was like, okay, it's another project I have to manage, right?
Yeah.
Like, and
it just so happens to be your dollars and your decisions, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, steep learning curve, as you can imagine. One thing that I did was good. Again, thinking about highest and best use was like, I need to put a basement suite here. And at the time, I thought, wow, I'm so smart. I've discovered fire. And then I realized like everybody else is doing the same thing. But it worked out well. Anyways, long story short, worked about a year and a half on finishing that off and then finishing the basement and whatnot. Came to selling it, market was still down. I was like, okay, I'm going to break even at best. So I was like, maybe I should rent it. Although like, you know, I was like hoping that I could sell it. Started renting and I'm like, oh, wow, I'm actually making money on this. Yeah. And again, I felt that I've discovered fire. I was like, oh, you're telling me I can keep this for like 30 years, which was my mortgage. It pays me like $500-600 a month. After all the expenses, and after 30 years, I'll own it free and clear. I'm like, I'll take that any day.
Not a bad deal.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, I'm just going to keep doing this. So I moved to Ontario, tried to do the same thing. Nah, doesn't work in Ontario. You can't just buy a piece of land and build on it and expect make money. So then I got into like learning about land severances. I was like, oh, I got to buy a property with a big piece of land and then chop off a section of the land. So that's how you get the land for cheap. Right. Started doing that and then just snowballed from there. We were talking before the show that one from more than 2 years ago is still stuck in the bureaucracies of trying to get that little severance done.
Let's go there. Let's talk about that. So when you bought the property, tell us a little bit about, you know, your vision when you went in and how that brings you forward to today. Yeah.
So the idea was to keep the existing property and sever off the extra piece of land. So this was a corner lot. It wasn't too big. But at the time I talked to a planner, I'm like, okay, what do you think of it? So I did the initial. So I looked at a lot of different listings. Yep. At the time, I would just mostly just go on MLS and see what's there. This was like, 2020, I guess the beginning of COVID, or maybe it was mid-2020. So market was starting to get really hot. So I looked at it. I thought that there's a potential there. I had a planner. I paid what we call like a retainer, so then I can send listings to him for him to look at it like real quick.
That's a pretty good tip.
Yeah.
That's a great tip.
Because initially I was just like, you know, oh, can you take a look at this? And I was like, okay, people don't want to work for free. Like they might look at one or two, but they're not going to do like, you know, if you're sending them like 3 listings every day. Yeah. So I basically was paying him by the hour. And I was like, just look at this. So obviously I would do the filtering first myself. The ones that I thought there's potential, I would send it to him. Anyways, we thought there's potential here on this one. So we thought that, we can probably sever off the backside. A little small, but we can probably get it through the process. So that was the vision, and was to create a new single family lot on that one. So and that's what we are hoping to get now.
And that brings you forward to today, which you ended up at the OLT.
Yeah, so
Oh
we
my
did
God.
we did go through. Yeah,
Oh.
so it's a long story, but like City of Toronto, honestly, it's been a nightmare to work with. They have had a complete turnover of staff, and every new group of staff came there. They had a different interpretation of the bylaw.
No.
So, as an example, the bylaw says like if you have a semi-detached, this is the lot area requirement. Some people interpret it that's the two lots combined. Some interpret it as like it's each side, this side. They did not bother to clear
That's not clear in the zoning bylaw?
It's not clear in the zoning bylaw.
Oh my goodness.
So we had like a group of people, like the planner there, he was like, yeah, this is like each side. And then somebody else came and was like, no, it's like combined. And we're like, okay, can you guys make your minds like which one is this at the end? And a few other things, right? Like to put a single family lot on that. One guy was like, no, this is not a minor variance. This is rezoning. And then he left. And we actually got lucky at some point. The next group came. They're like, no, we think this is a minor variance.
Yeah.
So at the end, we ended up getting away with applying for minor variance.
Nice.
But that did cost me because we did everything based on doing a semi-detached. So then we don't have to do a rezoning. So we would actually attach the new house to the existing house and calling it a semi-detached.
Yep.
We did everything. We were ready to go. We sent this stuff to the city. We didn't hear back from them for a while. We followed up and we're like, what's going on? I was like, everybody left in the planning department. The manager, the planner. We only have like an admin staff now. I'm like, so what's going to happen to our applications? Like, we're waiting to figure it out. And then they brought in a consultant, like they outsourced their planning department.
Yeah.
And
a lot of small towns do that.
Yeah, so it's actually good because then these guys came, they were professionals. They were like, no, we think this is a minor variance. It's not a rezoning. So we're like, it was good, but we had to go back and change all the plans, all the site plan, everything. So that was like, double the cost or whatever. Like that was there.
What did you spend on it this far?
Oh, it hurts. We're probably like the mid 20,000s so far between the planners, lawyers. Because when we went to committee of adjustment, they turned it down. They didn't like it. It was as simple as that. They're like, it doesn't fit the neighborhood.
Right.
And there's no definition of what fits the neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's just because the neighbors came out and said they don't like it.
Right.
They said it's too big for this area, blah, blah, whatever. So we had to go to the Ontario Land Tribunal, OLT, 6 months wait to get in there. And then I guess a couple of months after that, we had a hearing. So we finally had our hearing in January 18th. City didn't even bother to come and oppose it because they felt that
staff.
Yeah, because their own staff had recommended that this is a fit. So they would have to go against the committee of adjustment, which they would have to hire lawyers and all that, cost. And that would be on taxpayers' money. And
it's expensive.
It's expensive.
Yeah.
And they felt that it's a losing battle. So they didn't even bother to spend the taxpayers' money to oppose it. But funny enough, what's it now? Like it's almost 2.5 months. We haven't heard back from the OLT. We're like, what are you waiting for? Nobody came to oppose it. A couple of neighbors showed up. But, they were nice to them. They let them talk, although they didn't have status as, party status to oppose it officially. But yeah, we don't know what's happening. And they don't answer to anyone.
Wow.
When you ask, I was like, yeah, it's in the process. We'll get to you.
So did you represent yourself at the ULT or did you go with someone?
No, I had my planners and I had lawyers. Lawyers who specialize in planning. So I guess the planning bylaw and whatnot. So they're specialized lawyers that do that. I made sure I work with someone that has worked with my planners before. So it's really important for anyone out there that's trying to do this. Make sure you're working with a planner. I mean, there are people who do it on their own, but they usually have some background in planning or civil engineering or architecture. But yeah, having a good planner that's going to fight for you and share the same vision, and then working with lawyers who have done this and they're familiar with the city and the process of the OLT. Because it's not an exact science. It really depends on who you get that day.
Yeah.
And hopefully Bill 23 will kind of ease that a little bit. A lot of things don't have to go through OLT anymore. So, but that's really us. We can, have a whole show about that, like why we have a housing crisis in Ontario
That's right.
because of these things.
Yeah.
If it takes 2.5 years 2 years to try to do a single lot severance, I'm not going to do another one.
It's very difficult.
Yeah,
it's going to be like that.
It's not the highest and best use of my time or resources.
Right. If your dollars can make you more dollars somewhere else, or your time is better spent focusing on bigger projects, like why would you go infill?
Exactly.
If that's the case.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, and that's what I ended up doing. It brings us to like other projects that I'm doing. So we ended up like doing a similar strategy but bigger.
Yep.
I met my partner at a networking event. She had a sixplex, an old 180 years old, 150 years old house, a sixplex in St. John, New Brunswick, on a 2.5 acre lot.
Yeah.
I heard 2.5 acres. I just fell off my
You're
chair. I'm like, okay, I'm interested. Tell me more.
When you go to these small towns, like in any province, any state, whatever, and they've got all this land, and then you come back to Ontario, and you go, oh yeah, we got like a 50 by 120 lot. Yeah. All of a sudden, like people, like your mind can just go crazy, right?
Exactly.
You got so much space and parking, and
exactly.
it's easier.
Yeah, easier. So we're like, let's jump on that. And initially, we tried to like basically we figured the best would be to get rid of the old house because it was like really in the sweet spot of the land.
Yep.
And then do like I think we were proposing a 72 units. One thing that happened was it wasn't a heritage designated, that we made sure we triple checked that before we close or go firm. But apparently people were very attached to it because of a little bit of history that was on that. So that's another tip for anyone listening is just because the building, especially in these smaller towns, because the building is not on the heritage site or is not designated heritage building, doesn't mean that people are not attached to it or they're not going to come and oppose it. And believe it or not, they started a petition. We ended up on CBC, like there's a CBC article about us, this Ontario developers coming out to destroy our history here. And so it was something we didn't expect. And there was like a petition against the proposal, 900 signatures, letters to the councillors and everyone. Whereas we did our pre-application consultation with the city, they were actually supportive of it. They're like, yeah, we need more housing. We are excited that you're planning to do this. But we had to back off. You don't want to swim against the current. This would eventually, because we needed to rezone the site.
Sure.
So we had a plan B, which is very similar to what I did with the single lot, but it was much bigger, which was to keep the existing and then subdivide the lot and create new lots and rezone those.
Sure.
So that's what we're doing now. We actually just wrapping up the renovations. We're in the process of refi. So that's where the energy efficiency and my mechanical engineering background comes in. And I've been very passionate about that. Like even in the house that I started building in 2017 in Lloydminster, I tried to do some energy efficiency upgrades. It wasn't a big topic at the time. And that's where the name EcoLux came from, is eco-friendly luxury. Nice. That was my goal initially. It was called EcoLux Homes. I was thinking to build eco-friendly luxury homes. I've diversified from that. I'm not
into
looking at,
that's right.
I'm not going to do like luxury, but like I still want to build quality stuff. But anyways, that background, MLI Select came out. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to be all over this because this is right up my alley. That's what I knew this was missing in Canada. So we're doing that on the sixplex. We just renovated. We did a whole bunch of energy efficiency upgrades. We actually reduced the energy consumption by like 45% and the GHG reduction emissions by about 42%.
That's great.
So it feels great. We're doing great. There's something great for the environment.
And you get better financing.
And you get better financing. And we can pretty much pull out all our equity from that. So we're going to own the land almost for free. So keeping fingers crossed that the refinancing comes through. Now we're going to subdivide the lot and create 2 new lots on each side. Most likely will be a 20 and a 40 unit. And then we just need to rezone those sites now.
Gotcha.
So jumped on a bigger
so you weren't going to go low-rise subdivision like bungalows or something. You're going to buildings.
We're going like, So that's what we're going to aim for. But obviously we have plan B and C in case we get pushback in terms of density and whatnot. It would still work with like, a lower density.
Yeah. What's good about that too is you can phase it.
Exactly.
So like instead of building one, would you say 72 unit?
Yeah.
Instead of doing one, like you can do the left side, for example.
Exactly.
In a phase, you can get your money back. How did you do? What do you change? You go make it better for the next one.
Get to know your contractors, get to know the people you're working. Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. So that's what we're going to work on. And then after that, started looking in Alberta. So I used to live in Alberta, like I mentioned. And then came about really my most exciting project with because it's not just me, with my partners.
Yeah.
We found this listing. Actually, one of our partners brought it to our attention. 2 houses side by side. I quickly looked at it. I was like, oh, it looks like we can do like a 25, 30 units, something around that on this one. Let's jump on it and see what we can do. Mm-hmm. And again, always looking at highest and best use. We look at the neighbors.
I get so excited every time you say this. I'm like, oh, finally, somebody that gets it.
You've really picked the topic that, like, a lot of people think about it, but maybe we never like put a name on it.
Put a name to it, right?
Yeah, make it a brand. So I love what you've done. Like it's, now it's more focused on it.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, like on my way here, I was like, oh yeah, like this principle, we apply it on day to day, but we may not always pay attention to it. So it's nice that now it's like, something that you pay attention to it and you actively look at what's the highest and best use. So anyhow, like we noticed the 2 other properties there. And if we get these 2, we'll own like half a block with 3 side access because there's a back alley.
Yeah.
We're like, we got to go for this. We got to try this. Was a kind of a, uphill battle to like get the neighbors on board and whatnot.
Were they upset?
Well, they wanted a lot of money. They hear developers. They're like, yep, I want double like what my property is worth. So one of them, we managed to get it at market price. It was actually a functioning 4-plex, cash flowing pretty well. So he had the right to, want, a good price for his property, and it was functioning very well. So we got that still like just below market value. So we got, pretty lucky with that one. Mm-hmm. The corner lot was the one that was holding us back. And this guy owns it free and clear. He's owned it for like 30 years. We had like tenants in there for like 15 years or whatever. And he's like, I don't need to sell it. Yeah. And apparently they had some beef against each other because somebody else tried to assemble these lots before. Geez. And like one guy was asking a lot. So he was like, no, now I'm going to ask a lot. Yeah. I'm like, okay, let's like, calm down here and see what we can do. It was only 10 phone calls of like 45 minutes to an hour with the guy.
Oh my gosh.
But we managed to get him to agree to a 1-year closing in exchange of a higher price.
Wow.
So here's another tip. Because he came out, so it was like $700 to $750 at that market, what it was worth. He was like $1 million, not $1 less. We're like, okay, there's no way we're going to pay you $1 million. Mm-hmm. Project is not going to work with that. We got to do financing. We got to do private mortgage, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to go through all the details, like all the scenarios we went through with him. But we tried like VTB, partnership, blah, blah, nothing worked. And we're like, okay, if we buy this property, even at like $750, we're going to raise the capital. Yeah. We're going to have a mortgage at like 10% at the time, which sounds like a really good deal today.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. And like we have to come up with 20% and we have to pay this for a year. Yeah. This is the funny part. Cash the 1 year. That was the projected time to do a rezoning in Calgary was 1 year.
Right.
That's a joke in Alberta, in Ontario.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
Think about that, what I just talked about.
Yeah.
Almost more than 2 years with like a single lot severance. Put that into contrast for highest and best use of your time.
Yeah.
Right? So we're like, okay, for a year, so we figured like it's going to cost us about $175,000 to $180,000 to carry this property for a year. We're like, well, yeah. We're like, okay. Well, also like giving up the equity and whatnot to investors.
So you're like, hey man, you keep the house, you collect the rent. Exactly. Let us do our planning in the background.
Exactly. So we got it with a 1 year closing at $925. So it was a win-win for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just to manage to bring him down a little bit, like bring him closer to reality. And really we didn't overpay for it. Right. Just the same interest or whatever we would have to pay someone else.
It around the line
we just paid it to him. Exactly. Yeah. So that's like kind of getting creative and not giving up. Just, I know a lot of times like you trying to like negotiate off market deals and whatnot, and it gets difficult. You just have to find out what that other person needs and trying to find the middle ground. Yeah. So worked out really well. It's a good
example of price and terms, right?
Exactly.
So many people focus on the price, but you're like, hey, there's a whole other side here that other people didn't see that you did.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're like, hey, you want more money? Like, there must be a reason you're asking for more money. And he was like, well, I know what you're going to do here. So he actually knew what is possible because people had built 17-story towers across the street. Yeah. So he's like, I know what you're going to try to do here. We know the previous guys that were trying to do the same thing. We're like, okay, so we can't really, hide from this guy. But
when they know, they know.
What's there? They know it. So he was like, I want a piece of the pie. I'm like, okay, we have no problem to give you a piece of the pie. You can be a partner, but we can't just pay you extra because this is not a sure thing yet, right? Like it's going to be a process.
Yeah, there's still risk there.
Exactly. There's still risk. So we're taking all that risk. So we can't just give you all that extra money. So, just like sometimes you have to educate them as well. Mm-hmm. Like that was the piece. We had to educate him of like what we're actually trying to do and why we have to be careful with our costs. So, so worked out really well. We managed to assemble the lots and there's immediate value there.
What do you think the value goes up when you assemble multiple lots?
Yeah.
Let's just say everything is purchased at market value, and on a percentage basis, you're able to assemble all of those and then do something bigger than you would have individually. Like, do the lots double in value? Do they triple? Is it rezoning? How does that work?
It depends on the market and where you are. Depends on the location. Right? There's no one single formula. We believe for this assembly, we probably created about, I would say conservatively, about $400,000 value by just assembling the lots.
Right. No zoning change, no nothing.
No zoning change, nothing.
Yeah.
Just assembling them because how much work was there. Because apparently 2 other developers tried to assemble these 4 lots together. Because it was like, if you would kind of look at it from Google Maps and you had a little bit of development lens on, it was yelling for development. Like we have 6 17-story towers across the street. There's a park on the other side. There's a condo on the south, it was like 5 or 6 story. This is just like, it's like asking for being developed. Yeah, exactly. Precedence is there. We don't have a lot of neighbors. We don't have like a lot of single families that would come and oppose it. We are 500 meters from the biggest mall in Calgary, which is Chinook Mall. We are 700 meters from the LRT station. And
oh my gosh.
So that's, you can see why we were like, okay, that was the motivation to go through those 10 phone calls of like, 45 minutes.
There's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Exactly. I was pulling my hair out, but I'm like, there's a prize at the end. Yeah. But it really depends on the location where you are. If you're like downtown Toronto and you manage to assemble something that's like 200 by 150, oh man, you don't need to do anything else probably for the rest of your life.
Whoa. Before we get back to the episode, don't forget to sign up to the VIP newsletter at thehighestandbestuse.com. You get great tips and tricks there, completely free. Also, don't forget to grab a copy of the book at thehighestandbestuse.com, Amazon Chapters, Barnes & Noble, all of these places. That's where you can get it. You can get it in paperback, ebook, hardcover edition, as well as the Audible version too. So if you like to consume content by audio version, grab that. If you like paper, grab it there too. And now back to the episode. Isn't that funny how the value of dirt changes depending on location?
Exactly.
Like a 2x4 in Southern Ontario is the same cost as a 2x4 in Northern Ontario. Yeah. Generally. Yeah. Right? But like the value of that thing when it's done is very different. It's the same thing with your dirt.
Yeah.
Like depending on the province or the state
depending
that you're
on where you are, Well, it's supply and demand, right? Like and in development, here's another tip. It's what you can get at the end. That's what everybody looks at. The value of the land is about the density of what you can build on it. We're talking about your project here. It's like if they tell you can build 30 units on this, it's a very different value than if we tell you can build 3. Yeah. So if you go below like 5, it's not a commercial like 5, 6. Yeah. It's a little bit a different look. But we're talking like multifamily or condo sites and whatnot. The value is really tied to per door or per buildable square foot. So that's what really drives it. Yep. And with this one in Calgary, again, for listeners who are not familiar with Alberta, I'm not telling people to run to Alberta and do developments there.
Go near the mall, near the LRT.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, come by our site. Yeah. But it's a 1-year process that we have budgeted to get the rezoning done. Yeah. And we are proposing a 24-story tower on that site.
That's just unfathomable in Ontario.
Yeah, in Ontario, that same thing would at least take 3 years, at least, if you're lucky. Yeah. Right? And they will probably cut it to half at the end, like what they'll give you, right?
Yeah. I've heard 6 to 7 years from end to end.
Yeah. From the time that the developer looks at the site, tries to put an offer, tries to get it through the system, by the time they can put shovel on the ground, it's probably 6 to 7 years, maybe if not longer. That's why we have a crisis, right? In Alberta, we didn't even bother to go and do the site plan because when we did our research, we realized there's not a lot of value associated with getting a site plan. They call it a development plan because it's so easy to get it. So that's another tip.
Wow.
It depends. So the value that's created is about how much work it takes to do that, right? If something is easy, it doesn't have a lot of value. If you're downtown Toronto, you assemble the lot and get a site plan approval, you're set. because it's so difficult to get site plan approval in Ontario.
Yeah.
Whereas in Alberta, we realized there's not a lot of value associated with that, except for whatever you have paid for the cost of doing it,
Right.
if the buyer likes what you have designed.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually went through that. There was a site that was shovel-ready in Edmonton, beautiful design. We looked at it. They had to spend like $400,000 on the plans and all that engineering drawings for, I think it was a 52 units.
Yep.
And we looked at it. We're like, no, we don't like it. We're not going to pay you the $400,000.
Yeah.
Because it was designed like a condo, like really fancy, expensive to build. Like we wanted to build a rental. Our GC partners, they looked at it like, this is really expensive to build. We can't build this, right? And funny enough, they're still sitting on that. And I was having lunch with one of the owners the other day, and he was like, yeah, we have accepted that, we didn't know what we were doing. So another tip, the risks involved in land development, don't think that just because you've designed something that's beautiful and you love it, everybody else is going to love it too.
Feasibility is a big issue.
Exactly. You got to really cater to the end market, know your end. Like the book, I love this book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yeah.
One of the rules is start with the end in mind. You got to really know where you're trying to get to and who your potential customer is.
Mm-hmm.
When you're building your triplexes, you always have in mind who's going to live here. Yeah. So you cater it to that, right? What you would build here is different from what you would build in downtown Toronto.
So when you're looking at condo versus rental, you said something really interesting there. When you're going condo, your price per square foot on the resale side is higher than a rental building, but the construction can be very similar. So like, how do you see that?
It's there. So my focus is on rentals. Again, back to that story of like building that rental in Alberta, I've been set that I'm only going to build rentals, built to hold mostly. Right. But with condos, it's a different economics of it. So the financing is very different. You need to have certain percentage pre-sold before you can get your financing. There's a little bit of higher expectations if you're building a condo in terms of what you put in there.
You mean
different
like
perspective?
Finish?
Yeah, finishes and construct. I think that there's a bit of a difference in the code requirements as well. If it's like all one title versus like their strata, there are certain requirements that you have to meet. That's why people sometimes try to do condo conversions. There is some cost, like some mechanical systems, HVAC systems, and things like that involved if they're individual units. But for me, I always look at it from the rental perspective. So it all really depends on what you're trying to get to. The valuation of the site would probably be similar. Because it's all based on, again, how many units you can build or how many square foot, like basically the buildable square foot that you can do. That depends on the zoning, the way it's written. Some zonings, the older zonings are units per hectare. So they'll tell you the units, they won't tell you the size of the units.
Right.
But more modern, recent zonings, they're usually FAR or FSI. So floor area ratio or floor space index, I guess. So
Are air rights a thing in Calgary and Alberta? And
they use different terminologies. In Alberta, they use FAR, so floor area ratio. In Ontario, they call it FSI. Same thing. It's basically a multiplier of your land size. If you have like 10,000 square foot land and your FAR is 5, you can build 50,000 square feet of living space. That includes all your basically hallways, staircases, and all that stuff. So that gets into like the efficiency of your building. So in Calgary, what we tried to do here, we started with FAR of 5. Now that we're talking about FAR, but now we're asking for 8. So
they're asking for 8.
We are asking for 8.
Okay.
You're proposing 8 because the existing precedence is FAR 5. But we're proposing 8. So that's going to be a bigger building, taller building, obviously more value. Funny enough, the price per buildable square foot drops as it gets bigger because it becomes like, it's like a wholesale versus a smaller. Just something to keep in mind. So it's
why
not
would that
exactly
be?
Proportionate.
Why would that be? Like one foundation, one roof, and whatever's in between? Or like what makes it more efficient that way?
It's just a bigger building. Like it's like buying bulk versus retail, right? Like it's if it's a smaller building, you can charge more for per buildable square foot because it's just the number gets bigger, right? So now we're talking like 7-8 million versus like 4-5 million. So they usually try to negotiate more when it's a bigger purchase, right?
I guess there's only one crane too.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to set up a crane, you might as well set up a big one.
Technically, it shouldn't be like that,
Right.
but the reality of market is, when it's a bigger purchase, they try to negotiate it, the lower. But so yeah, that's basically that one. And you're like, okay, well, highest and best use of my time is to do bigger stuff.
Bigger stuff, yeah.
And that also allows to engage bigger consultants, bigger contractors. They're usually easier to work with, in my opinion. Maybe that's just because of my corporate background.
Sure.
I feel more comfortable working with larger firms. But yeah, those are some of the bigger projects. And then now we're pivoting a little bit into multifamily value add.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. How do you identify an opportunity? What's the biggest thing for you where you're like, you know what, these are my top 3 things? What is it?
So my focus has been multifamily and land development. So basically the return on investment, what are the risks? So I did risk management for years. So I'm always thinking risk.
Where can this go wrong?
Yeah,
How much
exactly.
money can we make? How long
exactly.
does it take?
There's a methodology in risk management. They call it the what if analysis.
Really? Okay.
Literally, you say, what if this? What if that? And then what's the mitigation? What's the consequence? So we say, okay, what if this takes longer? What if we can't get it approved? So basically the worst case, not absolute worst case scenario, we always call it the worst plausible scenario.
Right.
We don't want to say like sky is falling. Obviously you won't do anything if you think about that.
Worst plausible versus worst possible. Are
Exactly.
they different? Or are they the
that's
same?
different. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The worst possible. Yeah. It's possible that we're sitting here.
Yeah.
A meteor can hit us right now. And we turn into dust.
Yeah. All of a sudden real estate isn't the biggest issue.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a worst possible scenario. But is it a plausible scenario?
I like that.
Do we need to consider that scenario?
Yeah.
Probably not. And, and I can get technical about what if the likelihood is less than a certain amount, you don't have to consider it. But it's like lightning hitting you. There's really stats about what is the likelihood of lightning hitting you walking in the street. If that's the likelihood, usually you don't have to consider it because that we don't worry about that walking.
The 0.0001.
Yeah, it's
whatever,
like 10 to the power of -7 or something. It's like 1 in a billion chance that's going to happen, which is still more likely than winning the lottery.
Yeah. Buy your tickets.
Buy your tickets. But yeah, I think about the risks. What are the risks involved here? Do I have the resources to do this?
It's a big one.
Right? Just because it's possible doesn't mean is highest and best use of my time and resources, right?
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Exactly. Yeah, I've heard you say that
It's
before.
true, man.
It is true.
Yeah.
Just because you can doesn't mean that you should.
Somebody told me the other day, they were like, hey, density, and I thought this was really interesting to your point, is they were like, density isn't always the number one thing. And not that I always thought it was, but they're like, density isn't always the number one thing. And I was like, what do you mean? Right? And then they explained, they're like, a site that doesn't function with high density may or may not be better than a site with a little bit less density. That's amazing. Yeah. And I'm like, wow.
Yeah. If you can't sell it when you built it, that's another thing. Like I know people who have built, I was like, oh my God, I can build like 100 units on this site. And the whole city or town is like 5,000 people. I'm like, well, it's probably, it's probably, you're going to be waiting for a long time to fill that building.
Have you seen those mega cities in Dubai where they're building it's called The Line and covered in mirrors and stuff. And it's like an indoor city. Like they double the population. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah, they can do that. Yeah. Well, they have a philosophy that say build it, then they will come. Yeah. I mean, that could apply in some scale in some situations, but I would cautious people.
Dubai has all the money to roll the dice and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So they build a building, but they also build entertainment around it.
That's right.
You can do it, right? You can do it. Like they built West Edmonton Mall, which actually I just heard is going to turn into Universal Studios.
No way.
Big news. If anybody wants to go and buy, properties around West Edmonton Mall.
Cool.
It's out there now. But they built that mall. It's like it was the biggest mall in North America till recently. Yeah. About 45 years ago. I'm like, what were they thinking back then? There was nothing here, right? But what they did, they built it in a way that you would go there, your kids could go play in the indoor, water park. Yep. Somebody could go shopping. You could go play mini golf. You could come out and have dinner. You could just stay over. Yes, that would work. They would come and stay. They built it and they will come.
It was an attraction in itself.
Exactly. Yeah. So you have to go really big to make it like build it and they will come. Yeah, if you want to build a 100-unit apartment building, make sure you build something around it too that will attract people.
That's really interesting, the ripple effect, because you see in some of these bigger cities, like even Toronto, they build all these condo towers and they put hundreds and hundreds of units in those. But then the infrastructure underneath it, like the restaurants and the coffee shops and so on, if you put 100 stories of residential and 1 story, typically the mezzanine, worth of retail. Yeah. Like all those people just keep shopping at the same number of stores or the same number of restaurants.
Yeah. And now it's become a thing that they put grocery stores like in the basement or whatever, one of the floors under the tower.
Isn't that smart?
Yeah, that's really smart. Yeah. So now that's a concept we're kind of diverting a little bit, but it's called 15-minute neighborhoods. It's a big thing in developments now. So they say you need to be able to access everything you need, like groceries and whatnot, within a 15-minute walk. And that's really the big topic in urban planning right now. It's called 15-minute neighborhoods. Wow. And they're trying to basically, that's to minimize traffic issues, right? Toronto and these places. Like what you mentioned, if you build those towers and you don't build grocery stores and restaurants or whatnot, guess what's going to happen? People are going to be driving in and out like 3 times a day, and that's going to create traffic. It's going to put pressure on the infrastructure in the city. So now they're trying to make it more walkable, bicycles and whatnot. So that's kind of a topic on its own for another day. But so development right now, construction costs, it's crazy. And interest rates were high, keeping fingers crossed. They're starting to come back down a little bit to reality.
Come on, baby.
So, I know. keep going. So we have to pivot as investors, right? So one of the things that I did, and that was kind of learning from renovating the 6 unit, and shout out to my partner. We worked together on that one really hard. But the learning of how to navigate this CMHC MLI Select through the sustainability. Because for those who are not familiar with MLI Select, there are multiple paths there, but there are 3: affordability, sustainability, energy efficiency or sustainability, and accessibility. Yeah. You can't qualify on accessibility alone, but you can qualify on affordability or energy efficiency alone. And again, my passion is sustainability and energy efficiency. I love to use the energy efficiency path because I feel good about doing something great for the planet. Also, affordability, it will make the numbers really difficult to work, especially in Ontario.
In what respect?
Because you have to discount your rents.
Yes.
To maximum rate. Right now, they look at 30% of the median renter's income in that city. And I will repeat that. It's 30% of the median renter's income, not median everybody's income, renters. And CMHC has its own stats on renters' income. And so you make sure you check the right source for that 30%. Don't just look at the median income from, whatever the source that you find. Stats Canada or something. Stats Canada and stuff. Make sure you look at CMHC website. They have a specific table that they talk about. Find the city and look at that.
It's pretty low.
It's pretty low in Ontario.
Low. Yeah.
Well, you go to Calgary, it's $1,700 bucks. So all your 1 bedrooms, even sometimes 2 bedrooms, would be affordable. Yep. In Edmonton, is $1,660, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. So your 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms could easily qualify as affordable. But in Ontario, energy efficiency is the biggest one. Even in Alberta and on those places, you don't want to be capped at your rent. At the end of the day, in multifamily, it's about your NOI. If your NOI is capped, the value of your building is capped. That's right. And if you're not making money, guess what? You're not in business anymore, right? Right? You can't do all the great things.
There's no affordable housing to provide.
Exactly. Yeah. There's no house. You're not out there to do great things in the world with your business. So we need to make sure we can sustain our business.
Isn't that the forever balance? Trying to do good and still make the economics work. It's a forever balance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then we try to do that, right? We try to that's the attractiveness about development. You're adding more units to the market. Yeah. There's value in renovating older buildings, providing like, high quality, safe space for people to live. Because sometimes some of these older buildings, we have all seen them. Like, I know you find those like,
oh my gosh. The worst of the worst.
The worst of the worst. And I've seen your videos, like you find the things that you're like, okay, you're really doing something good by renovating this. Like this, you're creating a safe space for people to live. But yeah, so really tapping into the energy efficiency piece. So learning from the 6 units that we did in New Brunswick, and it went really well and qualified for the MLI Select. Now we're applying that into multifamily space.
Yeah.
So we just recently acquired 2 9-unit buildings, one in Oshawa, one in London. We bought them as a portfolio. They were pretty much almost vacant. We only had one tenant in each building, which we're still working on. So the previous owners were investors themselves. They had bought them. They did the cash for keys. They started the renovations, but their partnership took a different turn, and they needed to sell the portfolio. Gotcha. So shout out to my partner. He picked it up, and then I came on board a little bit later from the, again, like trying to qualify these for MLI Select. It's a bit of a different lens to put on, because we always look at like, oh, we're going to renovate it for, the looks and like attractiveness. But then when you put that lens on, like to create the energy efficiency, you might prioritize different things. You might put a heat pump and AC, but not put a washer dryer, which wouldn't be intuitive, like
it would be,
if MLI Select was not involved. You would say, oh, I'm going to put a washer dryer instead of a heat pump. But the heat pump will qualify you for the MLI Select, but the washer dryer won't. Yeah. Right? And then now with the MLI Select, you can go up to 95% loan to value. You only need 1.1 DCR, limited recourse mortgage, 50-year amortization, which is the biggest thing.
It's huge. And the hardest thing, too, is like when you're going to do all these green renovations, a lot of times they don't pay. The government comes out with these programs and they go, oh, yeah, spend $25,000 to retrofit your house with new windows and doors and attic insulation. And you're like, great, I'm going to save $48 a month on my gas bill.
Exactly.
Like, how long is this thing going to take to pay off? But what you're saying is you can still do this work, and now you can save the money in the carrying cost.
And you get this money back at the refi. Yeah. That's how we look at it. We're like, okay, adding a heat pump is going to cost me this much. And then we look at the NOI, we look at the value, and then we say, okay, now we're going to qualify for MLI Select. We can go to 50-year amortization, 1.1 DCR, and you normally get a better rate if you're CMHC insured mortgage. And now we look at, can we take this money back out at the end of the day? And if we can, then we'll say it's a go. And that's really the strategy. Like it is a higher upfront. Yeah. Like with our New Brunswick, we looked at, okay, if we were to do a energy efficiency upgrades and all those stuff, would probably be a $250,000 renovation. With all that, turn into a $400,000 renovation.
Wow, an extra $150,000.
But we can take all that money out at the refi.
And you have a better building.
You have a better building.
Warmer.
And with that one, we ended up like separating all the utilities, sub-metering water and everything else, transferring everything to tenants, brought up the value of the building.
Could you convert it to condo since you separated everything at some point? Like as a future
down the road? The building code would, we would have to do like fire separation, and we have to bring it to today's code. Right. And this was an old building. We didn't want to move any walls because that would trigger like building permit and whatnot. So we didn't. Exactly. So we just did like plumbing upgrades, electrical upgrades, and whatever we needed to make it safe. But we didn't move walls or anything like that. We didn't
Sometimes it's not worth it to go through the hassle, right?
No, it's not.
To just get carried away. Yeah.
And also, like, you have to look at the market again.
Yeah.
Like in St. John, New Brunswick, condos are not a thing.
True.
Yeah. True. There's no market for that.
You know what I think it is? I think it's the price per square foot of the land. It's the value of the dirt. Like in Toronto, because we have no supply, we have to go up because there's nowhere to go. Right. Yeah, exactly. Which pushes the price per square foot of the building higher.
That's right.
So on and so forth, which justifies the cost of construction. But like, when you have dirt for it's like endless farms. Yeah. Or like
you can just
why would you go up? It doesn't make any sense. Right?
Yeah. Same thing in Alberta. Like condos are not a big thing. Like downtown Calgary, a little bit downtown Edmonton, but other than that, like why would people buy a condo if they can buy a house like 15 minutes drive from downtown? Yeah. And that's really how far you need to go to get into like some affordable like bungalows in Edmonton, right? It's not like Toronto, you would have to drive like 3 hours to find anything slightly more affordable.
The term drive till you qualify just doesn't apply, right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
It's like you just never stop.
Yeah. So yeah, that again, the highest and best use of resources, right?
Yeah.
Like if we can spend a little bit more money, but still get it back at the end, get it back out, that's counterintuitive. But those are the scenarios sometimes we have to look at to make sure it is the highest and best use.
Gotcha.
Right? Cheapest option is not always the best option.
That's true.
Right? I mean, you do high quality work, you don't cheap out. Cheapest is not always the best, right? Mm-hmm. It could be, but it's not always the best option. So we have to really optimize. And one thing that might be interesting, we were talking before the show, was this London property and looking at the highest and best use.
Yeah. This is I for anybody listening, I actually stopped him during our pre-show conversation. I was like, I want to hear about this on the show. I want to hear it live because it's a really neat story.
So again, applying the principle of highest and best use, every time you're doing something, you got to look at different scenarios and say, is this the best option? Is this the optimized option, right? So with the property in London, it's 9 units. We noticed that it's a larger lot. So we're like, okay, let's pull the zoning. And that's where I kind of brought some of my experience with land development. I was like, okay, let me pull the zoning and see what is there. And we actually noticed we can add 5 more units. To be exact, it's like 4.98.
Yeah. Go for the variance.
Yeah, exactly. We're hoping that they're not going to make us go for variance for like
0.02 or something.
0.12% like deficiency on the units count. But yeah, we figured that we can add 5 more units here. Wow. So we're thinking like, okay, what is the most efficient way of adding these 5 units? Like, do we add like 5 townhouses at the back, or like do something else, like maybe add a 5-plex on the lot? And then we're like, well, we have the existing structure. What if we could go up 1 floor? So we're actually exploring adding another floor to this building.
Nice. And
adding 4 units there, and then we can convert the laundry room to another bachelor unit.
Yep.
And so the process started with checking the zoning first, making sure the zoning allows it. We're like, okay, looks like we're good on the zoning. The next step was like, are they going to make us go through site plan approval? And like we checked with the city, and we at that point started engaging consultants. We're like, what does it look like? We realized that actually recently London changed their parking requirements, so we don't even have to add parking for the extra units. We already have more than enough parking.
That's great.
Based on the bylaws. And the other lucky thing is they told us, like, don't try to touch the zoning because the official plan has changed, and these are grandfathered zonings.
Oh, wow.
In this area.
Wow.
So because there is a development right behind us as like bunch of townhouses, stacked townhouses, and an apartment building. I'm like, my zoning allows I think it's 15 meters, which is almost 5 story, but they're only going 3 story. And I was like, that doesn't seem like highest and best use.
Yeah. Can you acquire those rights? Can you acquire the FAR, FSI air rights from the neighbors so you can build more?
No, but turns out that because they had to rezone the site, they were bound by the new official plan. Oh. So they're actually limited at 3 story. Oh, wow. But we're not, because we're grandfathered in from the old zoning.
That's weird.
Yeah.
Zoning doesn't usually go backwards. It usually goes more density.
Apparently they have changed the official plan to lower the zoning in this area, but anything that was zoned before,
you're good.
They're not going to change it. It's already there, right? So
that's a win.
Yeah, exactly. So we're very excited. That one is good. The site plan, we realized we don't need a site plan. We're like, we just need a building permit.
Wow.
So the last week we did a walkthrough with the engineers. The structural engineers have to come there. We had to expose foundations. We had to cut the floors in like 5 or 6 locations, expose all the foundations, all the footings. We had to expose all the beams, open up some walls and whatnot. A lot of destructive stuff, but we need to renovate the building anyways.
Yeah.
So now we're just keeping our fingers crossed that, they give us the go ahead, the green light with the structure, and that would be basically just adding a floor. And that shouldn't be too expensive because, we're not building foundation or anything. It's just basically just walls. And
so what do? Cut the roof off and then go up?
They're probably just gonna take the roof, and we are hoping to use the existing structure on the roof as the floor, so we don't have to like reinforce anything there.
Yep.
And it kind of looked good from what we have opened up, but we have to wait for engineers to give us their blessing.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're just gonna add walls and just build another roof and see how that goes. And
flat roof up top when you're done, or pitched roof?
So I was actually thinking about it driving here, because I was like, the flat roof seems to be more expensive.
Right.
So we might try to change it to flat roof if our height allows.
Yeah.
But those are the details we'll figure out as we get to like basically optimizing the cost for that. We'll have to see which one makes more sense. Existing is flat roof. So they might make us like maintain the same kind of look and design, but we'll work on that later when the time comes. But it really creates a lot of efficiency. And one thing that triggered this thought was, we were like, okay, if we need to, like the electrical and stuff is pretty old in the building. We're like, okay, if we're going to spend all this money, it's not going to add a whole lot of cost to add a few more units. If you're bringing all the wiring all the way to the top floor.
If you're already in a mess, be in a mess.
Exactly, yeah. So we're like, okay, maybe this is the highest and best use.
This is the time, man. This is it.
Just going to top it up another floor. All the plumbing, and if we are putting any new plumbing, it all has to come all the way to the top. So we might as well extend a few other feet to another floor. So we are very excited about it. This will make the numbers really great. And our investors are really excited about it. We're all hoping that, this will get the go-ahead from the engineers. And
any resurfacing required? Electrical, like transformer or water sewer? Probably
not transformer, but the servicing needs to be upgraded for sure. The current panels, because these old buildings, they didn't have, in-suite laundries. The electrical load was pretty small. So that's one thing, like we want to make them like nicer, add like washer, dryer, dishwasher, heat pumps. We might want to convert. So this one is a really old gas furnace. We actually got our gas bill the other day. It's like more than $2,000 a month for gas. We're like, this is insane. Yeah. It's like a 60-year-old like furnace. Yeah. So that actually helps us with achieving the energy efficiency upgrade. In this building, by taking out the old gas furnace, converting everything to electric and putting heat pumps, and changing the windows and a few other smaller things, we are actually reducing the GHG emissions by 65%.
Really?
It's crazy.
Wow.
This furnace is so old, and there's so many of these buildings.
Is it a boiler? What is it?
It's a boiler. Yeah. Like we have like it's boiler. Sorry. Yeah. And then we have a hot water tank as well as also gas. Is pretty old. And there's so many of these around Ontario. Yeah. And this program really targets and encourages people to spend the money, because like you were saying, like if program was not there, you're like, okay, I can spend this money. Yeah, it'll save me a little bit of my monthly expenses, but it's going to take like 20 years to pay off. But now if you can refi with CMHC, you get all that money back right away. Yep. That makes a huge difference.
Which allows you to create more housing because you're reinvesting and you're rolling over the funds, right?
And you reduce GHG emissions, you improve energy efficiency, that does really good stuff for the planet. Now you end up with higher quality, houses and homes for people as well. So does a lot of great things. So shout out to CMHC for finally coming out with a great, don't get too cocky, finally coming out with a useful program. But so really excited about these projects. It's a portfolio. It's a lot of work to run both sites at the same time. But again, shout out to my partner. We're putting a lot of work into this, but we're very excited about it.
Awesome, Ali. This has been amazing. Like from this side of the mic, I can tell your sincere passion and genuineness towards these projects that you're doing. I mean, like just you shine when you talk about this. You just shine. Like your smile just comes through. I can tell that you really enjoy it. It's like I say, it's a true passion, and you're obviously very skilled. So from me to you, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. I'm really definitely passionate about this stuff, and I'm always happy to talk about it. And again, thanks for having me here, and hope that your listeners got some value out of this.
For sure. Where can people find out more about you?
Facebook, Ali Nazarian. On Instagram is EcoLux Developments. You can email me at info@ecoluxdevelopments with the S at the end, .com. And I'll be happy to, if people have questions or want to learn more about our projects, reach out to me.
There you have it, Ali Nazarian. So thanks for tuning into the Highest and Best Use Real Estate Podcast. Don't forget to sign up to the book at thehighestandbestuse.com. There's lots of links there. You can check it out. I'm Ryan Carr, reminding you that good deals are found, great deals are created. Like, share, follow, and subscribe, and we will see you on the next episode.